hey, one of the stories from there. Don't pick a fight with the wrestling team. Just don't do it. It's not going to go well for you. I know they're small. Hello and welcome to Ready for Nintendo. It is February 6th, 2025. This is our first episode of February 2026. We've made it to February. It's episode 913. I'm your host, James Jones. I'm joined today by Mr. John Lindemann.
It's great to be here, James.
Great to have you, John. Mr. Guillaume Vayette.
Good evening.
Good evening. And Mr. Greg Leahy.
Ahoy, hoy, everyone.
We are going to do some new business to start the show, and Greg is the only... I mean, new business is an incredibly nominal phrase this week.
I've been dabbling in Witcher 3, but I have no real desire to talk about that game because it's 10 years old at this point.
Does Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 have any appeal to you?
I've been wondering about that. I don't know. I haven't really read up on it, but
It reviews really well.
Yeah.
The only reason I didn't buy it was it's a continuation of 1, and I never played 1, and I'm like, maybe I should play 1.
Yeah, and then I've heard sort of middling things about the first game.
Yeah.
Not glowing reviews, but like the combat is very clunky and stuff like that. Like, yeah.
But then again, I played Mountain Blade, so
yeah.
It's clunky combat is all relative once you've got through Mountain Blade.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, new business. We don't really have a lot of new business this week. We have old business, and I'm gonna let Greg kick us off with the newest of old business.
Yes. Parents have thought it was all about something 10 years old, when you can talk about something that's over 14 years old, but has in fact been ported to Switch. So I guess it can nominally, as you say, James, qualify as new.
Right.
It's the DKC Returns HD version. So yeah, it's a funny one. In a lot of ways, there isn't that much to say because it is basically just that game with the kind of levels that were added in the 3D version a few years later, presented in high definition on Switch. So there's I'm sure surviving audio of me in particular, and probably not just me, because I think you played it when it came out as well, didn't you, James?
I
DKC
did.
Returns, yeah. So, there's the younger versions of us talking about that game when it was new. If you could want to delve back into, the back end of 2010 or whatever, to hear that. But, broadly speaking, I quite enjoyed it at the time. There was obviously a kind of resurgence of platformers going on in those years. You had, I guess, New Super Mario Bros. Wii was the big one. From a commercial point of view, but you did have stuff like Wario Land Shake It before that, and then DKC Returns after it, and certainly DKC Returns sold quite well as well, actually, I think, if I remember correctly, even though I guess the Wii's best days for selling software were kind of behind it by the end of 2010, but the bottom hadn't fallen all the way out yet.
It was able to create a little mini spike on its own.
Yeah, so that did pretty well back then. Then there was the port to 3DS, which in many ways it kind of felt quite apt because there's a lot of stage scenarios in DKC Returns that felt like it was almost kind of designed around the idea of a stereoscopic display. Like relatively early on in the second world, there's a whole level about like tidal waves coming at the screen. And, you finding kind of cover to survive, and that's very 3D friendly, but there's lots of other bits and pieces. I mean, some of it you could say is just leveraging the fact that you've actually, you're doing it with polygonal graphics, even if it plays strictly in a side-scrolling, 2D kind of fashion. But it did feel like, some of these things, feel like they could work quite nicely in 3D, and they kind of achieved that in the 3DS version. However, there was sort of the cost of the resolution being quite a lot lower, and the kind of frame rate having to get cut as well. So it was nice in some ways. Not so nice in others, that particular version, especially, I think probably one of the nicer additions, I guess, for that one, which was a real kind of, bone of contention with the original version, was just the fact that, you could do, the roll command as just a button input, which you couldn't with the Wii game. That was probably the biggest sort of peculiarity about that, wasn't it? It was like, okay, yeah, we've got a Wii Remote sideways control scheme, right, as kind of one of the defaults. That's, and then you don't have a lot of inputs as a result of that, right? But, they did have like I think a Wii Remote and Nunchuck scheme as well. But even that didn't allow for you to just press a button to do that. And the thing is, I guess, you could say, well, how different is that from Super Mario Galaxy? We had to do the shake to do that kind of spin in the air. But the role, especially if you try to do things, that are a little more advanced in the latter stages, or maybe you're playing through where there's the mirror mode, which is essentially the hard mode in this, because you can, if you take a single hit, you die and stuff like that. The timing is pretty important. If you try to make particular jumps and all this kind of, and then to have that kind of imprecise, mechanism for activating that roll, which you can jump out of and gain a lot of distance and speed and stuff. It wasn't a great choice. So the 3DS version had that, kind of in its favour, but, being able to just use a button for it. But then it had the other disadvantages. So with this Switch version, while, it doesn't seem like the most exciting thing in the world, and it isn't the most exciting thing in the world, it at least offers like some possibility, not quite the best of everything, because, there's not going to be any stereoscopic 3D that would augment those, kind of, scenarios I already described. But you kind of feel it's like, okay, we can have 60 frames a second again. We can have, direct traditional controls again, and the choice of playing either on TV or, portably. Like, so it's almost the best of all worlds, and they've got the bonus levels from the 3DS included, right? So, that's again, with the price of it and all that, it's not, it's going to compare unfavorably to things like, in particular Metroid Prime Remastered, right? Where, yes, the game was pretty much untouched, but they did, in terms of the design and the layout and all that kind of stuff. But you did have, more significant new control options, and of course the graphics were like totally remade and look really, really nice. Some of the nicest looking stuff on the system. And, this very much does not, right? They've rebuilt the game in Unity, but basically just, and there's this new high definition textures, but it pretty much just looks like what you remember it from Wii to a fair degree. Although I will say, I think this game does benefit from being in high definition more than, like, say, something like New Super Mario Bros. U that was designed to be in high definition. Like, that was a HD game from the beginning. It was built that way. But, of course, that New Super Mario Bros. Aesthetic that it was sticking to was so kind of uniform and so kind of, like, pretty much dead set against detail in a lot of ways. It was just like very, like, you just wanted to be clear and bright. I don't know how much it really benefited from being in HD, other than, some specific like cases, like the Van Gogh world or whatever, like generally speaking, it wasn't something that seemed like it was a huge benefit. Whereas, to be fair with this game, with it being now, upscaled, or whatever, like you see all this kind of detail in the environment that you might have missed probably on backup Wii, and certainly if you was playing the 3DS version, because of how low res that was, and they had to cut a certain, amount of things out, or like turn them into flat background layers rather than polygonal aspects to keep that running at all. So, you can really kind of appreciate what Retro did with the environments, how kind of packed with little details and touches it actually is now. That's pretty nice. The fact that, it is actually running at, I think, 720 on the handheld, native resolution and native resolution on the TV. Now, obviously, this is no great achievement for a game that is nearly 15 years old and it was originally on Wii, but it's not that often that you get something that's native 720p portable, is it? Most of the time, it's even Tropical Freeze, the port from Wii U, I think that was 1080p on the TV, but if you play portably, it was a little bit below native resolution, and that gives the image just that bit of softness as a result, doesn't it? When it's that native match, it's just got that bit of extra kind of clarity and sharpness as a result. And so, especially playing as I did, exclusively portably on the OLED model, there's definitely, even though, you will notice the simple nature of the geometry, a fair bit. And, you will also kind of be thinking, this isn't as, interesting or, pretty to look at as Tropical Freeze. There's still, some moments where it's like, no, this, with the image quality and the art design that Retro gave it is actually, looks pretty good. So, that so far, that's all well and good. I mean, for me, most of the experience was pretty fine. I mean, I also did a bit of actually putting the OLED as a decent kickstand. So you could put it into tabletop and just use the Super Nintendo controller wireless to control it, which felt really kind of natural. Obviously, it's not the same as playing a DKC, the Super Nintendo game, because you have an extra action. So in this case, you're using the shoulder buttons, but essentially same kind of thing in terms of digital movement, kind of a run button. It feels really natural playing that way, and again, a lot better than that encumbrance that you had playing on Wii, where you had to get the roll involved and all that. So there's a lot of it that's there's just pretty. It was nice to go back to. You kind of feel the parts where it's this is just not as lavish as Tropical Freeze. It's not as creative as Tropical Freeze. It doesn't have as much of its own identity as Tropical Freeze, because it feels a bit more like it's, let's try and just recreate the original DKC a bit more. Not that it's one for one, but there's a lot of worlds and scenarios that are quite direct, and pretty much the whole soundtrack is just remixes of the DKC soundtrack. So some of them are really effective at what they're trying to do, especially the remix of the kind of opening level theme for the Silhouette level, the sunset level in particular, but it does come back for the other, the smog filled factory level or whatever. That's a perfect fit of just you take something, you're kind of reworking it in a way that fits with this new kind of aesthetic of the Silhouette level, that kind of chilled out vibe that it's going for. A lot of the others are a bit more unremarkable. It's not really putting a different twist on it. It's just kind of bringing it up to what was then up to date. But now, it's not or even just a few years later, where you compare it to the Tropical Freeze soundtrack, which is far more kind of lush. The instruments and the kind of variety in that, and obviously getting the original composer back to do new songs rather than just having Keiji Yamamoto kind of rearrange the original soundtrack. We just had more license to do new things with it, so you kind of notice all the ways that it's not as good as Tropical Freeze, but still it's no, it's enjoyable, it's kind of solid, and this is definitely the best experience I've had with the game, and the first time I played it in whatever it would have been, getting on for 12 years probably since I played the 3DS version of the game. I forget exactly when I got that, because it was some sort of some sort of promo or something, that I remember the Wii U promo very clearly, because that was when I got Game of Mario. But it's just when Nintendo, it was not going so hot, and so sometimes that you could get games for less, or just literally giving games away if you bought a particular thing or something. So I definitely didn't pay full price for that 3DS game, so it might have been a bit after it came out in 13, but I still think it was before Tropical Freeze came out in 14, so it couldn't have been that late, but it's hard to be sure all these years later. But in any case, it's been a decade or more since then, and you're kind of coming back to it and all that, so, you know, actually kind of seeing it and, you know, kind of being able to compare it to Tropical Freeze a bit more directly and all that kind of stuff. It's been fun, if not like, you know, particularly overwhelming or whatever. But I guess the fact is that these are things that didn't affect my experience, but reading about some of the things about the port sounds like it's worth mentioning, because there's a couple of sort of faux pas that might limit it for people that use these particular kinds of aspects of the game. So the first is co-op apparently has a sort of significant issue, because it sounds like obviously co-op was, you know, a pretty significant part of the Wii game, naturally, right? Like not to the same degree as New Super Mario Brothers Wii, but still, like the simultaneous play was possible with, you know, someone playing as Diddy. But apparently there was a kind of aspect of that where it's like they kind of allowed you to almost kind of cheat, in the sense that there's parts of the game where, you know, it's pretty essential to bop off an enemy to be able to get to a platform, right? And of course it raised the question, well, if Donkey's already done that, how's Diddy going to get there, right? Well, they kind of cheated it by like almost like it kind of that there's like a buffer where if you get in even after Donkey's killed it, like it will still count and you'll still be able to bop off it even though it's already dead. So they kind of allowed for that. Now, apparently that changed somehow in the 3DS version, where like that would not have been such a focus, because I can only assume you needed 2 systems and 2 copies of the game to even do multiplayer. And it's like, well, how many people would have done that? And of course, it would have involved wireless communication rather than just being on the same system. Right. So it's kind of no surprise that some of those timing things maybe had to change and stuff, right? And so that didn't really work as well or the same way or whatever. And for whatever reason, you know, with this version, you know, they did implement the levels from the 3DS game, but it also looks like that timing works the way it did in the 3DS game, which is to say much less well, essentially. But of course, you know, being on Switch, this should be, you know, the multiplayer sort of focus should be able to come back. It should be something that people, although, I mean, I never played it in co-op, but I mean, it doesn't seem like the most co-op friendly game, I have to say. And I mean, some of these levels where that would be a factor with the, you know, bopping off enemies, like that tend to be the really crazy difficult ones, like the unlockable temple levels. And it's like playing that in co-op, it's, you know, that would be quite a challenge, but it's still, you know, like you would hope that something like that would not have been sort of overlooked in that way. You know what I mean? That does seem like an oversight, and it's a shame that it hasn't been kind of addressed. I had no idea what kind of hope there is for that to get patched at any point. I mean, certainly doesn't seem like this was one of those games that was finished for ages, the way that some Nintendo games we at least suspect are. Yeah. Like Fire Emblem Engage or there's some other ones, I think, where that's been sort of suggested to be the case. Because, like, I think, you know, when earlier footage was shown of this, there were people go, oh, well, you know, like, that this graphical effect isn't there, or this thing. And apparently there's still some things where it hasn't quite kind of come out right from people that are paying very close comparisons to the original version or whatever. But it does seem like a lot of that stuff did get added in later, or some of it anyway. So it's like, no, the game did, you know, that earlier release footage from however many months ago, like, it does seem like they were working on it all the way up to, you know, when it came out. So I don't know what the possibilities are for something like that getting addressed. And they did just put a demo up, which is a little bit odd. It's not unprecedented. You do get demos post-release sometimes, but it is abnormal, isn't it? Where they sort of decide to do that later.
Also, it's like the least demo needing game in the world, because it sold a bajillion copies the first time, but I guess it's been a while.
Most of the people who would want to play it today might
are dead.
Not have been bored when.
Yeah, there's that. And even Tropical Freeze on Switch was a long time ago now. Like,
Oh,
that,
sure.
because that,
No, I
that
get
was
it.
like, that was the only issue I'd say with that is, like, again, if you are somebody who's a younger player or just new to have come to Switch, you know, let's say just picking a year out of the air, sits around 2020, and, you know, you Tropical Freeze passed you by. For goodness sake, you'd rather play Tropical Freeze than this. That's one of the things that makes this kind of quite niche in its own way. Is that just like I mean, it's probably a little bit of an exaggeration. Like I said, there is that image quality thing I mentioned, but Tropical Freeze is pretty much unambiguously better than this. You know,
Yeah.
like
it
almost
be.
every aspect. The graphics are nicer, the scenarios are more creative. Because it was on a more capable system originally. You know, there's more elaborate camera moves and all that. I think, you know, one of the things that I always thought about, like the Super Nintendo DK, was that I wasn't that fond of like the villain characters, the Kremlings. They just kind of seemed like generic, scaly platform villains that you'd had in like a million other platform games to that point. And then DKC Returns, the villains are like even worse. They've just like the tiki things have no personality at all. But then with Tropical Freeze, they're not amazing, but like the Snowmads or whatever, there's more character. They're a little bit funny, like some comedy to them or whatever. All these sort of animal Vikings invading DK's the island or whatever. Like it's not, there's nothing much to it, but it's an improvement. Like virtually every the soundtrack already mentioned. Like that's the thing. If you've not played a DK game and it's like you really like the idea of maybe a slightly more challenging, a slightly more kind of set piece driven side-scrolling platformer than, you know, the kind of some of the platform, although obviously like Super Mario Bros. Wonder like went heavier on the set pieces, to be fair, but it is super easy, isn't it? For the most part, unless you're doing some of the most advanced challenging stuff. So, you know, that's the thing, is like the kind of the first question you've got to ask yourself if these games have passed you by is just like, wouldn't you rather play Tropical Freeze first? Because there's, I wouldn't say, it's probably more like if you really like Tropical Freeze and you feel like playing more of it that's not quite as good, then this could be for you, kind of thing.
There you go.
But yeah, so that's really kind of, you know, where it is. And you've got those extra levels from the 3DS game are like solid. But they because you unlock them as like kind of to go with like what was originally like a standalone extra difficult level at the gate. At the end of the game, they feel a little bit anticlimactic because they're not pitched that way difficulty wise. They're pitched more like another level that could just have just existed in one of the worlds. Each of the worlds gets one, and it just could have been another one in there, but with some kind of unique stage element of, you know, particular platforms that do different things than you've seen before or various stuff. But, you know, they're not pitched like crazy difficult. So it kind of feels like maybe they should have swap places with the temple levels and put the temple levels all at the end maybe, but, you know, that's not what they did on 3DS, and it seems like they've just recreated it with this one. So I guess that's, you know, something that probably was never likely to get changed here, even though, I mean, it could have been. But the last thing that apparently is a bit of a, and this is very niche, but it is still a bit of it relates to a drawback about the game that also applies, is it does have significant load times, which, you know, if Switch 2 could like solve anything, it would probably, for me, it would be let's get better loading situation, because it is annoying. And obviously the funny thing is the Switch itself was like a huge improvement over Wii U for load times, specifically with Tropical Freeze, like, for instance. So I guess like these load times here didn't really strike me as being like severely awful, probably because I'm, you know, remembering playing Tropical Freeze a lot on Wii U where they would have been worse. But they are significant. But, you know, once you get into a level, and if you die, the restart's pretty snappy. I mean, stuff like that can always be snappier for me, but just like comparing it, it looked like it was every bit, if not a bit snappier than it was on like 3DS or whatever. So it was like, oh, okay, that's fine. But there is an exception to this if you play in the time trial sort of mode that opens up once you beat the game. And so the issue with that is that basically, if you want to restart a time trial, you know what I mean? Like if you're like, oh God, I've messed that up. There's no way I'm going to be able to get the gold medal now. Let's restart it. Then those load times are going to get really old really fast. And you might be thinking, well, can't you just like kill yourself and restart it that way in the game, and then that'll be faster? But it's like, no, it doesn't work that way in time trials. Death is just like a time penalty. It just puts you back at the most recent checkpoint, and you just keep going. So you have to actually quit out of it to restart it, to start a time trial mode again, run again. Which, yeah, I mean, look, I never really messed around much with the time trial stuff in the other versions because it's just, I'm not good enough at it. I mean, I could mess around with the hard mode stuff because that's got, in terms of the mirror mode, because you definitely get a bit of a better sense of some of the level design when it forces you to actually have to avoid taking any hits rather than, especially if you got Diddy, you can take like 3 hits before you're down to your last one. So certain parts of a level can end up being, kind of almost the level design gets kind of obviated at that point. There's like a level on the beach where there's pirate ships just firing a bunch of cannonballs at you. And it is just like, yeah, if I've got extra hits, it's like, I'll just roll through this. It's fine. Whereas when you play it like on the one hit mode, it's like, no, you actually have to think about the pattern of the hit, of where they're coming and the timing and really get it down. Like stuff like that I can cope with. Time trials, you've just got to be like, to get the gold medals, it seems like you've got to be too good, but better than, what I can muster to actually hit those with any kind of ability. But if you were, for whatever reason, if that's something you was really looking forward to, I cannot imagine like being able to cope with restarting it and it takes as many seconds as it does every time. It would just be really, really annoying. And that seems like an oversight as well. Just like, surely a quick retry function is not too much to ask. And I guess, when it was on Wii, it wasn't so much of an issue because, the loading times weren't as long. But yeah, it just seems to be lacking, with any additional kind of, layers of care and thought to resolve some of these kinds of issues. But if you're like me and you're just looking to play through it in single player, for the first time in a long time and enjoy, and appreciate kind of what it had to offer and how it led into Tropical Freeze, it's pretty solid. It's the best way to play the game, but it's nothing more than that.
That's fair. I'm if it wasn't full price, I probably would have gotten it, but I didn't love the game enough to get it at the time, but I would like to play it again. It's a good game. I kind of wish they'd just done a little bit more effort, to be honest. Like this, I know they did technically remake the game because it's built on a different engine, but it's not a remake, if that makes sense.
No, it doesn't fit. It's a port. You know what I mean? Like that's the bottom line is it's being ported to Switch, and that's just the way they ported it.
It's a very labor intensive port, essentially.
Yeah, sure. But the only other thing, there are some frame rate stutters that have been reported. I gotta say, I didn't see a lot playing through it portably. I don't know if there's a difference between the, putting it docked and playing it portably in that regard. The only places where I really noticed a couple where it was kind of like it repeated, if you like, where it's like, oh, okay, that's in the same spot and it's happened, was in the factory where there's like these flamethrowers.
Yes.
Like that came up a couple of times. So, which is, it's not great. Again, it's like you kind of feel like, well, the game that isn't that complicated like this, you really shouldn't be, you should be able to avoid having any kind of hiccups, especially because as far as I can recall, I don't think Tropical Freeze on Switch had any hiccups at all that anyone could find, and that's a more complex game, but it did not really have any material effect on my experience either. You know what I mean? It like at no point was it throwing my timing off or anything like that. The main thing is just it's so much smoother than it was on 3DS, and it's for the most part it seems really, really solid, at least portably. Again, I don't know if that's different for docked.
Anything else?
No, I think that'll do it.
All right. I'm going to go pretty quick because we talked about a few of the games that came to Nintendo Switch Online service last week, but we didn't talk about one of them. And that game is Super Ninja Boy, I believe is the exact, even though there's 2 boys. I just want to say we now have a candidate for the Quest for Camelot Award of 2025 edition of why the fuck did you release this? You should be ashamed of it. Now, Nintendo's not involved in this game, so that's good. So I'm going to give you an idea of what Super Ninja Boy is, because there's no instructions. There's no meaningful instructions. I would assume some of the information that is inscrutable is in the instruction manual, which there are no scans of on the NSO service. I wish there were. It'd be helpful. It is a RPG, JRPG, where you go to towns and you walk through over worlds and you enter caves and you go into one side of the cave and come out the other and go to a new area of the overworld. You know, very, very much of the era JRPG design. And as you walk around, you get into random battles. Again, it's overhead it's 2D overhead. And the random battles are side-scrolling beat-em-up content. It is 3-dimensional in a sense. You can walk closer and further from the screen, and you could jump up and down. And sometimes there are like platforms you can land on. So enemies will attack you, and you'll have to defeat a certain number of them to go back to the overworld and continue advancing. It might be 1 enemy, it might be 6 enemies, and they will spawn more than enemies than you need to defeat. Like there might be 8 on screen. Well, they're not on screen at one time. There might be 8, but if you defeat 6, it ends and the others disappear. The reason why there might not be 8 on screen is that the game can really only handle 2, maybe 3. So as you defeat them, more come in, and you can just keep walking. The battle area is a big loop. And then there's
this is a culture brain joint.
Yeah. Which
culture brain
lacks both culture and brain. Yes.
I mean, I know the thing is, what's funny is Culture Brain, I remember them.
Yes,
but
you would.
I don't know if people today would really remember Culture Brain.
So
they were kind of a terrible, it's kind of like C-tier, I would say C-tier developer.
I mean, they still exist, to be clear. Culture Brain
really?
is yeah, they do. They're not big, but yeah, they do.
Yeah, they just made these kind of weird. I don't know, sort of. I would say all I can describe them as is C tier, like Magic of Scheherazade, and
but that's actually relatively good for them.
Is it okay?
I mean, Baseball Simulator is their big one. That's the one that people remember.
Yeah, I can't hate on that. I love that game. It's a sequel to Culture Brain's previous title, Little Ninja Brothers, on the NES.
Sure. Well, this feels like an NES game. And it looks like an NES game.
Also, apparently has a few cameos from other Culture Brain games.
Sure.
Well. So if you recognize any of those characters, be sure to call them out.
I hope Hamtaro's there. Yeah, like the Scheherazade, the Super Chinese series. I can't think of what they did. Here no Ken. I think that's
Flying Warriors, Flying Dragon, The Secret Scroll, Chinese Hero, Kung Fu Heroes, Little Ninja Brothers,
Flying
Ninja
Warriors, and Flying Dragon are all Here no Ken games.
Yeah, I just remember. I mainly remember Culture Brain outside of Super Baseball Simulator, which is god tier. But
it's really good.
But I just remember them from they consistently had full page ads in video game magazines for some reason.
Well,
these oddball games that they had.
This game sucks. Is the problem?
Does not surprise me. Culture Brain was not really high quality.
Because there's a third mode, and this is the mode that I just fuck you, fuck everyone you love. It's the hater ball skit from Chappelle's Show, where it's I hope everything in the world bad happens to you and only you. I don't even know you, but I hate you. Because in this third mode, you walk into a dojo in town, and this guy goes, "You want me to train you?" And your ninja goes, "Yeah." And then you're thrust into these side-scrolling platform stages. Here's the problem. Well, I say that like there's one problem. There's a cornucopia of problems with these. One, they're pretty inscrutable. Now, you might say, James, how can a platformer be inscrutable? Well, my answer is, play Super Ninja Kid, I guess. But, jump is multimodal, I guess is the best way of describing it. You can jump straight up and go nice and high, or you can jump at an angle and move at an angle. You can only jump a certain height, though, if you jump at an angle. And frequently the game will give you platforms that are too far away or too tall to jump towards. Now, to say this, I mean, I was using the rewind and took dozens and dozens and dozens of tries at it and simply could not do it. The jump is simply not possible. And I thought I was missing a command. I was missing some kind of control. There's a little like bottom third menu with all kinds of shit on it. And I was like, oh, maybe there's something here that's wrong. Maybe I need to get a power up. No, actually, I was correct. The jump is impossible. Maybe you need to level up to get here. So I went and tried to level up. No, that's not it either. There are items you can buy in the store called dragon eggs. What do you think a dragon egg does?
Does it hatch a dragon?
It does. That you can fly on the back of for about 3 seconds to get over these platform challenges. They cost money. They're one-time use. They're about an entire random battles fight's worth of money every time you need to use them. The game never told you about them. Never told you to go buy them. Never told you need them. And you basically just get stuck in this training area, this platforming stage. And if you die, you go back to the start of the game because it's password saves.
Oh boy.
Yeah, buddy. So, my entire progress through the cave, which took a long time because the random battles can literally happen and again, it might be as soon as 1 step after you exit a random battle. I've seen it as low as 2, which if they went and put limiter code in there and set it to 2, that would be really fucked. Why would you even bother with the limiter code? I'm betting you could probably get it on the next step, which would be Skies of Arcadia level bullshit. But, not even the GameCube one, the Dreamcast one where the random battles are even more frequent. So, alright, so now you're in this thing that you don't know how to get out of. So I rewound, and finally I found somebody online posting a guide, about how this was his favorite game. And it was like a GeoCities page. Because of course it was. With a blue and white background. It was like clouds and shit. And white text. So you couldn't read any of it. It was all unreadable. I didn't even realize there was text there until I highlighted the page. And he mentions dragon eggs casually, like whatever. Yeah, dragon eggs, of course. Use your it just says like, use your dragon eggs. They're meant to be used is his directive there. And I'm like, my what? So I'll go to the store. Now keep in mind, I had to go on the internet to find the solution. Go in the store, and sure enough, there's an item called dragon eggs, or 25 currency, whatever the currency is called. I buy them. A fight might give you 30 currency. So I buy like 5 of them, because I don't know how many I'm going to need. I end up using all of them to clear the 2 dojos. And for my efforts, I get spider shoes which let me walk on the ceiling, and a throwing star that the ninja says, great, I can use this on the thieves now. And I'm like, there are thieves? Okay, I guess. So I go back out to do a random battle. And I try to use the throwing star. I'm hitting all the buttons. I hit A. Nope. Hit B. Nope. Hit X. Super no. Nothing happens. Hit Y. Nothing happens. L and R. Negative. Select. Nope. Start. Menu. Okay. So, here's the thing. This game uses 2 buttons. It uses X and Y. Punch and jump. A and B are not used at all. However, there are special attacks in this game that require you press X and Y at the same time. Why? Why would you, creating a game on the Super Nintendo with 4 face buttons, determine that you're going to persist your NES control scheme like it's fucking Double Dragon? A, B, and AB. No. It's stupid. It's very bad. It's just this constant cavalcade of why did you do that? Why didn't you tell me to do that? Why is it like this? So to progress the story, you leave the first town. You get told there's there's thieves. You walk through an overland area where there's no indication of what direction to go. You just sort of wander until you find a cave. Then you go through a cave, which again is full of dead ends, while you're constantly fighting random battles. You then are dropped in a new overland and then have to wander around again until you find a town, which you can go completely the wrong direction. Rewind got used many times and I realized there was nothing in this direction. And then you do these dojos. You're never told to do these dojos. You just have to kind of figure it out on your own. And if you didn't buy any dragon eggs or you didn't buy enough of them, you're fucked anyway, so it doesn't matter. It's awesome. Combat feels real bad, real stinky. It's on a 3D plane, and the hurt box and the hit boxes are super, super tiny, and they're very, very thin. So you can look like you're punching the enemy and just stand there, punch. Nothing is happening. Because you and the enemy are on very slightly different planes. And apparently are 2D objects. So they don't make any impact. One of your attacks is a jump kick, but there's no kick. You just jump and spin in a ball and hit the enemy, and that kills them. There is a little countdown. It's not SP. It's called like MP or whatever. And every time you do that jump attack, it takes away one of them. I have 14 total. And there is an enemy that, near as I can tell, is impervious to all attacks except that attack. So what happens when you run out of that? Well, you die. Very slowly, because the enemies suck. You could try to run away from them, but the run has literally never worked, and I use it almost every battle. This is just an unfathomably poor game. The overland feels clunky and slow, and then you're constantly getting hit by random battles. Like I said, I have gone random battle 2 steps, random battle 5 steps, random battle 3 steps, random battle. It's like, are you kidding me? Why are there so many? What am I gaining from this? Nothing. The answer is nothing. The combat feels real bad because, again, it's a 2-button combat on a 4-button controller. It's stiff. The axes don't make any sense. The fact that the jump kick is really just a jump spin. When I finally had the throwing stars, it turns out throwing stars are in a menu option, and you can only use them if you have 6 MP or whatever the stupid stat is called. At which point you go into throwing star mode. So I ran into the enemy where I had to kill 6 of them using the jump spin. I'm like, okay, well, at least I'll save some energy on this idiot. And I put it in star mode, and the stars bounce off them. It's terrible. Is there any indication that the stars would bounce off them? No. No, there is not. Do punches work on them at all? It's just an axis thing. Nope. I've tried constantly, and nothing ever hurts them except the jump kick. And do they have an attack that hurts you? Oh, boy, howdy, do they have an attack that hurts? It's just like, I'm baffled by how bad this is. I'm legitimately kind of dumbfounded by the sheer lack of good in this game. Like,
yeah, I mean, this is one of those games where I wish I had, because, you know, that's a funny thing when I went home for Christmas. I do have a stack of these old, I could look them up online in the Video Games Archive, but yeah. I have a stack of old magazines, and I wonder how this game reviewed, like an Electronic Gaming Monthly.
It should have reviewed very bad, because there's nothing good about it. Like, there's nothing good about it. There's no way in the era, because, alright, so it looks like a very, very slightly nice NES game. Like, it looks bad. And it's a Super Nintendo game. It has 2-button controls. Again, it's a Super Nintendo game. It doesn't know the shoulder buttons even exist. I reiterate myself. I'm reasonably convinced this was an NES game. And it got, like, shoddily up-ported to Super Nintendo. They're just like, oh, well, it's out now. This is part of the Super Chinese series. Like, it's the first one they released on Super Nintendo. It came out in 1991. 1991?
Yeah, it's 91. Yep.
I guess it could have been an NES game, but like, it came out late 91. It's over a year after the thing came out in Japan. I don't understand. Like, certainly they were aware the other buttons existed. This is just it's just so bad. And it's like, why? Why did we include this? Like, there's so many other games that you could have put on the system. Now, not Culture Brain games. Like, I get that. I get that, like, we got to work with what Culture Brain has. But there's got to be something better. Nothing would have been better than this. That's the sad reality. And, like, the last time I said this, we were talking about Quest for Camelot, which is why the award is named the Quest for Camelot Award for just general shittiness on the Nintendo Switch Online service. Like, one less game being in the package would have made the package better. Its exclusion would have enhanced the offering. Or rather, its release has diminished the offering. Because it's just terrible. Like, there's nothing else to say. It's flagrantly bad. Is a nice way of saying it. Have we ever gotten the 7th Saga on this service?
No, we haven't.
I don't think so, yeah.
No.
Nintendo, do that. I know that game's got problems. I get that. But it's better than this. Anything's better than this. Arrow the Acrobat's better than this. Like, where's all our Koei games? Like, where's all the Koei business series? Get us that. Get us that weird, fucked up American Gladiators game from Game Tech. I don't care. It's wild that we have a situation where they just keep releasing just awful games on this service. Like, this isn't like,
I know, like choosing awful games.
Yeah, like somebody is actively calling Culture Brain and saying, "What do you got?" And Culture Brain's going, "Look at this piece of shit." And Nintendo's saying, "All right, sure, bet. Here's your money." You could just say no. You could just say, "No, that game sucks ass. I'm not paying you for it." You could just move on. Like, there's other things. I mean, Sute Hakun got put on there. Like, you can deep cut. You can deep cut all day. You don't have to deal with shit. Like, nobody is going to be upset about the exclusion of any entry in the Super Chinese series, but this one in particular. This NES game and Super NES cartridge clothing. Like, you could put literally anything else in here and it would be an improvement. They put a game about I can't remember what the name of the Dakar Rally. I can't remember what that game is called. And it's weird and inscrutable and difficult and not very good. And it's got the Amiga thing where 2/3 of the screen is devoted to UX. Mm-hmm. But it's more fun than this. Like, this isn't interesting. It doesn't do anything novel except it just mashes ideas together. But, like, that's at least, there's things like having your pit crew and understanding what car parts you're going to need to have in stock. And, like, calling for service and not hitting things and the lights turning on and off. Well, the sun. And like what kind of navigator you want. So you get more warning about turns, and there's environmental stuff like you drive through a dust devil at one point and you can't see the road anymore because it's an off-road race. If you don't hit the time, the time check, it's not necessarily the end of the world. It'll just take time off how much time you have on the next race. Or if you go ahead, you'll get more time. It's like there's a lot of cool things in that game that I actually thought were really interesting. Does it play good? No, it plays terrible, but it's at least interesting. There's nothing interesting here. And I think that's the problem. Like, if you're just going to put shit on here, put weird shit that's like, got an idea. This has no ideas.
Yeah, it's at least, I like it when they take games that were never released stateside and put them on the service. Even if they suck, at least it's interesting.
Where's the Kyle Petty racing game for the Super Nintendo? That's a real thing, by the way. That really happened. I'm not joking. I don't know why. I don't know why.
He's the better Petty, in my opinion. It's controversial, but
yeah, I would say it is. Where's leading company, John? Where is fucking leading company? I know it's in Japanese. I don't care. I want
leading company. Is that a horse racing game?
No, that's the VCR game.
That's the VCR game. All right.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what Koei game would be really funny. Because I've just decided they're the ones we need. Liberty or Death is like a weird simulation game they ported from the PC DOS. That'd be really funny. I'd be down for that. Like, there's just a lot of stuff that we don't have that we're never going to get. And instead, we're going to get shit like this. Like, fuck it. Give me, I don't know, that Japanese Lodos war game. I don't care. So, yeah, I won't be able to play it. It's not in English. Don't care. At least it's visually interesting. Like, that, I'll take that. It's visual. Like, this game is also bad to look at. Like, that's the thing that's killer. It just sucks to look at. It sucks to experience. Like,
I'm still trying to. I'm going through EGM. I'm trying to find a review of this game just out of curiosity.
I mean,
by the way, Sonic the Hedgehog in '91, it got 9s across the board in EGM.
The Genesis one, right? Not the Master System.
Yes, the Genesis one.
Okay, yeah. Like it could have been the Master System. Fucking put Mario is missing on there. I know.
At least with that, I've never played Mario is Missing.
It sucks.
And it's one of those games where when I went, I'm sure it does, but it's also one of those games where if I went to Jumbo Video to rent a game back in the day in Canada, I would have seen it on the shelf and I was like, man, I'm not going to rent that. And I would have just bypassed it. But I've always been sort of Mario is Missing curious, if you will. There you go. You're welcome.
Mario is curious.
Mario's curious. But it's one of those games where I would actually play that because I have no idea what that game is about. I've never investigated it, never even looked at the back of the box.
To your question, I would not. If you will, I refuse. It's not... It's like they put these games on here that aren't interesting and are also bad. Like you can put bad games on here, and if they're weird and stupid and like kind of funny, that's fine. But if they're bad and boring like this one, then yeah, there's nothing to it. Like the thing is, like, it combines 3 types of gameplay. You know what else did that? Robin Hood fucking Prince of Thieves for the NES. It does that, and that does at least in a kind of interesting way. Put that on the service. Fuck it. I don't care. Kevin Costner is Robin Hood. Great. Awesome. I love it for us. But it's just... that's the thing. Like, it's just such a boring fucking game. And so miserable and feels so bad. And it doesn't do anything well. And it looks like shit, and it plays worse, and it doesn't explain anything. And you literally cannot progress the game if you don't buy Dragon Eggs. But at no point does anybody tell you that Dragon Eggs are even a thing. Like, why would you... If you climb up a wall... All right, so you jump to a wall. You can now climb up the wall. What do you think happens when you reach the top of the wall and keep climbing? You're climbing a wall. What would happen? If you were climbing a wall, what would you do when you reach the top of the wall?
I mean, you would either go over the top of the wall or fall down or not be able to go any further.
Yes.
That's all your choices.
Let's just say there's nothing above you on the wall. Like, it's not like a ceiling you're running into. You would assume you'd vault over the wall, right?
Yeah, eventually, yes. I would assume that if there was a wall there, that would be an obstacle to be...
If you were playing a game where someone put a wall climbing mechanic in it... You would presume that climbing the wall and reaching the top would allow you to summit the wall.
I would assume that if there was a wall climbing mechanic in the game, that I would be able to use that wall climbing mechanic to further my aims in some way.
Yes. Well, you can indirectly. You reach the top of the wall and said ninja kid just climbs in place from that point forward. He does not go over the wall. So how do you get him over the wall? Well, you jump away from the wall and try to jump back to the wall. Or try to make it back to the wall. There's no double jump, so you'd like to have to jump and jump back real fast. That's really weird. You will never reach the top of the wall when you do that. You might get closer to the top of the wall than the max climb will let you go. If you do it again, then you might manage to land on the top of the wall, but likely you'll have to do it a third time, and then finally you'll be high enough on the wall that you manage to just barely make it to the top of the wall, where there's almost certainly an enemy running around who's now hit you and put you in a stun lock, and you're going to fall off the side. Also, there are no lives in this game, so you're back to the start.
That's really bad.
There is a way to continue. You have to go into town. So there's a store, or there's a shop, and then there's an unmarked building called a convenience store in every town. You only know it's called a convenience store because when you walk in, the guy says, "This is a convenience store. You need 27 experience to level up." And then your options are passcode or leave, basically. That seems to set your respawn point. Does the game tell you this? No. It most certainly does not. Because again, everything is inscrutable here. Scrutability is non-extant. I just hate it. I hate it. I just want something that's like not bad. Is that put fucking Sculptured Software's Monopoly on here? Fuck it. I don't care. Anything. Yeah. So, don't play this one. This one sucks. The Dakar Rally one, give that one a shot. It's bad and it's weird and it's hard, but at least it's kind of interesting. Like I got, let's say, playing it for 30 minutes, I got 15 minutes of semi-enjoyment out of it. I got negative minutes of enjoyment out of this. So, Super Ninja Kid, fucking terrible. I actually got more. All right, this is the part that I can't believe I'm about to say it. I actually enjoyed playing Quest for Camelot more, and I wrote a completely fucking deranged rant at NWR about Quest for Camelot called "Nintendo Owes Me an Apology." Because at least that game is stupid and weird. This game doesn't have the balls to be weird. It's just boring and bad. That game is weird and bad. And I'll take weird and bad every single day. I will take Stone Cold as a film every single day versus just like generic action schlock. Because at least in that one, somebody feeds a candy bar to a monitor lizard. And there's something to be said about that. If you can't guess what we're talking about before the show, there's your answer.
You should already know.
Yeah.
I think that should be a reference. It should be a reference people recognize on this podcast by now.
I think there's pizza involved, too, in feeding the lizard. I can't remember.
I mean, it's feeding it to a monitor lizard. I mean, if you're not... I mean, the only way I would accept that is if it's being cut with a pair of scissors. So,
well, that's a different movie, though. And
I know.
That movie's not nearly as funny as Stone Cold. It's because it's just not as stupid.
It's not as stupid.
It is as stupid, but it's way too self-serious. Where Stone Cold's like, what if we do the dumbest thing possible in this shot? And you're like, yeah, I agree. Do that. Also, it has Lance Hendrickson. So like, whatever. Fuck it. All right. Anyway, movies. I'm not talking about movies. We're also talking about bad games. And I don't want to talk about bad games anymore. It made me sad. John, you told me before the show that you're going to pass this week. Are you going to hold to that?
Yeah, I'll hold to that.
Okay. I just wanted to call it out. Guillaume.
Yeah.
What are you up to?
Yeah, so I played through Final Fantasy 1, the Pixel Remaster version. I am kind of surprised that I actually played through the whole thing. But then again, like I looked at the in-game clock and it said that it took me 12 hours.
It's pretty short.
So it is very short. That's shorter than usual, and part of that is because they give you a run button, which didn't exist in the original game. And also, they give you the option to set it so that maybe, like, what if you didn't press the run button? What if you ran all the time and then the B button, you transform that into the walk button?
Oh.
So that's how I played it. So the run button doesn't work on the overworld map, but it works everywhere else in dungeons and cities. So it's very helpful, and it does cut the game, the runtime, the length of the game a lot. So it was very quick. As quick as it was, at some point towards the middle of the game, when you first when you blow up the little piece of land that's kind of locking your vessel, your boat in like that inner sea on the first continent. Mm-hmm. So you blow up a little bit of a piece of land, and then like you can go and face the first of the 4 fiends, which I believe is the Earth one, the Lich. Anyway, so once I got to that part, I wasn't sure that I was going to keep going, because I complained a little bit on the Discord, and I think it was Meowth on the Discord who said like, "Oh yeah, I played it not that long ago," and just seemed like a like there's not, you don't do like your main character doesn't do cool shit on a motorcycle or anything. Like it's just go here, go there, go grab the doodad and whatever. It's just a to-do list basically that you're going through. And I was like, is that true? I feel like the last time that I played it, which was the GBA version on the Dawn of Souls version, which was in 2019, by the way, that I talked about it, longer ago than I thought. I when I played it, I really enjoyed it. I was on vacation. I was playing it like camping, so it was, I don't know, I was enjoying myself. And I was enjoying discovering for the first time the fact, in hindsight, the fact that the first Final Fantasy is full of references to Miyazaki movies, specifically Castle in the Sky. Like there's it's blatant. Like,
yes,
of course, like the airships are, more or less from Nausicaa, but like there's like a city in the sky from long ago that's deserted or whatever. Like that's the last kind of a dungeon that you visit, the Fiend of Air. But like they talk about this ancient civilization that made these robots, and like one of them fell to the earth. Like that's just a scene from Castle in the Sky. So I was enjoying discovering these references that I could not possibly know about when I was a kid, because that movie hadn't been localized, So, yeah, like there's some fun stuff going on in Final Fantasy, but in that particular moment when you just exit that sea, and you go do the Earth Cave, it's probably the worst part, because like for some reason they're like, okay, here's the dungeon. You're gonna go through 1, 2, 3 floors. You face a vampire, you kill it. He gives you an item, and then like then there's something behind him, but you can't do anything about it. What you're supposed to do is exit the dungeon, go talk to this giant outside that you learn from a townsperson nearby, that like he liked to eat rocks. So you give him the I don't know, the star jewel or something. I can't remember what the vampire gives you, but it's a rock, so you give it to him, and so he's like, yum, and then he leaves, and then you can go grab the staff of fire, which is the thing that you needed to keep going in that dungeon. So it's just purely wasting your time, basically. Like, you were in that dungeon, you were doing well, the game forces you to exit, go grab some item, and then go back into the dungeon, go down all 3 floors again, and then there's 2 additional floors beyond that, and then you can face the Fiend. And of course, this being the first Final Fantasy, it's pretty difficult, and the way that the magic system works is not, you don't have a pool of mana points that you just consume. The way it worked was more, I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, but I think that like the way that works is that it gives you like a certain number of times that you can use spells from a certain level. Like the lowest cure spell is a level 1 spell, and as your character levels up, then you can use the level 1 spells like 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, and maybe like you've got your level 2 spells that you're going to be able to use like 2 times, 3 times. So, and as you level up, you can use your higher level spells more and more. But there's still like a hard cap of, you can only use these spells 9 times. Like you can get 3 spells from on each level, And then, like, in total, these share 9 uses. So when you're going down when you're exploring a very big dungeon, you're going to run out of spells eventually. So really, like, you want to load up on potions. You don't want to have to use your spells too much. That works well with the healing spells and stuff, but that also means that, like, you don't get the equivalent in this game for your black mage. His offensive spells, the fire and lightning and everything, you want to be able to use them to clear out, like, big bunches of enemies in one go, but you really can't, because then you're not going to have your spells for when you need them when you're facing the bosses. So as you're going down, like, those first 3 floors, and then, like, the game is like, oh, go talk to the giant. You don't directly go to the giant usually. You go all the way beyond the cave where the giant is, and you go back to town, and you go rest in an inn so that you can replenish your spells. And then you go to the giant. And then if along the way you use spells, sometimes you go back to town again, and then you go back to the dungeon that you were in to explore. Because, yeah, like, you need to have your spells. So that is one really annoying bit in the game, and I feel like, I probably spent too much time talking about that one annoying bit. The good news is, like, it's really, like, that's the worst offender, like, that's the worst part of the game, and after that, I enjoyed myself a whole lot more, and I rediscovered again the stuff that I discovered the first time 6 years ago when I played on the GBA. Like, it's got fun towns, it's got, like, a mermaid village, and, like, like, some people are like, oh, like, there are some rumors that, like, the mermaids came to the land, and they use this thing to grow legs, and basically they're living among us. And then, like, you go talk to some lady, and she's like, hey, look at my legs, look at them, look at what I'm doing with them.
Hell yeah.
And it's it's very cute. So, like, there's stuff that kind of disappeared over time in the Final Fantasy world as well. Like, you see dwarves, you see elves. That kind of stuff got replaced by something else, by Moogles, by whatever else, they got replaced by the series' own creatures, basically. So it's fun to discover that as well. But yeah, so I had fun. 12 hours is very short, but yeah, so that flew by. And the Pixel Remaster is a better remake than the Game Boy ones, or, like, than any of the other remakes that I played, if simply because it does a thing where it makes the game easier to play, but it does, and the graphics, like, it does upgrade the graphics to basically, like, 16-bit levels, improved from, like, the 8-bit NES graphics, but it stays faithful to the original art, basically, and it reimagines, like, all these monsters and whatever. Like, they reimagine the sprites as what they would look like in 16-bit, whereas in the GBA game, for instance, they just didn't seem to care much. Like, they were following different guidelines or something, I don't know what, but just the one example that sticks out to me is the black mage who turns into a black wizard during the class change scene. On the SNES game, I always found it cool when I was a kid. Like, oh, like, he loses the weird straw hat, and like, he looks like a little bit evil, almost like glowing red eyes or something. And, like, anyway, like, he looks very cool. And all the characters who look very chibi become less chibi a little bit. They look taller, they look more proportioned. In the GBA game, like, that didn't really happen. Like, the Black Wizard turned into the Black Mage and the Black Wizard sprite is almost the same. He keeps the straw hat on, and I can't even tell you what the difference is. I think maybe the color on his robe changes a little bit. Like, I can't even tell. So, like, I always thought, like, well, that kind of sucks. Like, it's kind of a retcon. Like, they're kind of using the they're retconning how these classes looked like, how these characters looked like back then, and I didn't appreciate that. Whereas, Pixel Remaster, a little bit more faithful, and I like that. I appreciate that.
Was the font to your liking, Guillaume? Because much was made of the fonts in this game.
I specifically, I was not going to buy it without a good font. So
Good.
I'm glad that, But it's weird because they released the game on the Switch, and I think that you need to patch it so that you can get the good font. Mm-hmm. So I bought the cart, and if I, like in decades from now, if I can't download the patch, like I'm going to be stuck with the crappy iPhone font.
Yep.
And it sucks. It's like, come on, guys, like it didn't have to be this way. You could have included it from the get-go. Like, you had already added it to the PC version, as far as I can tell. Anyway, it's weird. Square Enix still weird sometimes about remakes. One last thing I want to say about it is that the fact that you can run everywhere changes the feeling, like, of playing Final Fantasy completely, to the point where I think that, yes, it does contribute to this feeling that Meowth talked about of, like, just going through a checklist. Okay, like, now you go there, and you do this, and you go there, and then next, like, you need this item to go open up this path, and, like, it's very much, you're going through the motions, basically. Whereas the way that I remember playing the game, like, you get lost in it, right? Like, it takes forever to get to a cave at the other end of the continent, right? So it was more of a journey, basically. But also, like, I was younger. I didn't play as many long games, so, like, there's that. My memories of playing the original Final Fantasy are indissociable from the fact that I was like 11 or 12, and I was experiencing console RPGs for the first time. So it kind of changes my perception of what playing those games were. But the fact is that when you can run all over the place in this version, and you can beat it in 12 hours, it does make it feel smaller, but there's also the fact that it is smaller than basically any other Final Fantasy game that came out after it. I don't really have a point here, I guess. Like, it's not like I wish that the game didn't have a run button and forced you to play it the old way of basically, walking everywhere and takes forever. I don't think that's what I want. But I just want to note that it does kind of fundamentally alter how this game feels.
Yeah,
anyway,
it lets you basically sprint through it, right?
Yeah,
like literally. But it's like, that's the thing. I mean, I think it's and also the time when this game came out. I mean, games were just shorter, so the scale of this game compared to everything else on the market would be much larger in your mind.
Yeah. So it's not really like this remake's fault or whatever. Like, there's a lot, contributing to this feeling, right? Like, the fact is you can't go back to 1990 and play this game for the first time. But it's kind of an interesting question to me of, like, how, just this addition of being able to sprint through the game just changes your rapport with what it is. So. Yeah, anyway, so I played that, and other than that, like, I very briefly touched Ridge Racer 64. It's pretty neat, but I haven't found, I only played, like, through 2 races, so I've got a lot to go. I need to go back into the options to see what button allows you to change the camera, because it's a little bit weird. It starts you with the first-person view of not even inside the car, right? But just more like you're on the hood.
Yeah, I think
you don't see the car.
I think it's the top C, but up C button. But of course, with the kind of, so you presumably you'd either, like, flick the right analog up to get that, or you can hold ZR and then press X, because if you hold ZR, it kind of modifies things so that the 4 face buttons, instead of, being B and A and 2 of the C buttons, they become all of the C buttons in the correct place. So you just hit the, in the same diagonal formation, diamond formation, I should say, and then just hit the top one, and that should do it. Yeah. So.
Okay. I wouldn't have figured that out without, just by experimenting for sure. But yeah, so I want to change the camera, but playing it in first-person view was kind of interesting. But this is a game where you're encouraged to drift through every turn, so it can be disorienting when you've got the first-person view, and I prefer to see where my car is on the track. It does play differently from other Ridge Racer games that I've played. Like there's something a little bit off about the controls, but it's still it's quite enjoyable, and does the whole thing of like, now you're in a tunnel, and this tunnel is made of glass, and you're underwater, and you see the fish, like all that good stuff. There's a helicopter, it's flying over the track. So this is definitely, it's got the most of the elements that make up Ridge Racer, as far as I can tell.
It's got ridge and racing.
Yeah, and I found it quite funny, like that effect, like the kind of, how do you call that, like light remnants or something? Like, you remember like watching Akira, when there's a whole scene at the beginning when like you see the motorcycle from the back and it's night, and they draw like that trail of light, like basically the light on the back of the bike is like drawing in the air. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah. I've seen it in Ridge Racer 64.
Okay.
The red tail lights of the other cars.
Yeah. So when you're watching the replays and stuff, you do see the red tail lights, but because the graphics are a bit sharper than on an N64, you can more clearly see that it's just basically a polygon that's kind of sticking out of the back of the car. So that's kind of funny. I was like, at first, like, oh, cool, looks cool, and then I saw like, oh wait, that doesn't look quite right, and you can kind of see the seams a little bit. You can see the strings. You can see how they faked that effect. I found that kind of funny.
It's similar with because the draw distance is pretty good, in terms of it feels like you're seeing quite far in front of you for an N64 racing game. But you can, again, especially with the higher resolution, you do see some tricks they're doing where it's like, okay, if you could see like a kind of, where like there's a bend in the distance and there might be like some, kind of, bit of the environment, you could see that it's like a simpler version of it before you get closer to it, and then like a more complicated polygonal version of that loads in. It's the same trick in Mario 64 where like, if Mario gets far enough away from the camera, he goes to like a lower poly version that's got like a beak instead of a nose, because it's just that simple at that point. Like it's that trick, but you can, again, freed from, the kind of, the 240 resolution kind of fuzz, and whatever display technology you might have been using back then, it's more obvious than they would have imagined it to be.
And like to finish my new business, I did briefly go to this, new arcade in downtown Montreal, which, kind of sucks. I was not, like, there's no old school arcade game. There's no, like, basically it's all Raw Thrills machines, which, like, they're not great. Like, I did enjoy.
Go ahead.
I did enjoy cruising on Switch for a bit, but like it gets old after a while, like, and we've talked about how they're not actually racing games per se. Like, it's more of a, like, they fake the racing aspect. You can't actually do well against the computer. It's more like the illusion that it's a close race until the very end. And so, like, all their games are like that, it seems, at least the ones that I tried. And it's funny because one of the games that I tried is Super Bikes 3, which is basically cruising but with bikes. So you're straddling, like these bikes, like you're shifting your weight left and right to control it. Like we've all played those racing games, but and it's got like the fans blasting air in your face occasionally, although these ones seem to be a little bit defective. But they were basically the tracks of cruising with the same effects. Like sometimes you would jump up and like, oh no, it's a big drop and there's a giant T-Rex right in front, but no, like you're going down and then you crash through the ground for some reason. Like literally, it is a track in cruising. But I just wanted to mention, like there's one bit where like it's a Los Angeles track, and immediately starts you out with like trees on fire all around you, and the city is on fire, and I was like, this is not that old, is it? Like, surely the fires of LA were already kind of a big thing when this game was made. Like, it seems to be in poor taste, and especially now, like with
it's not ideal.
The severity, the severity of the fires that happened the past few months, but it's I don't know. I was like, ew, I was tugging my collar, like. This is awkward. But yeah, like other than that, yeah, like the machines were a little bit underwhelming. There was I think it was like Godzilla versus Kong kind of VR thing. So you're hopping on to a ride, like basically like this thing moves, like shakes around and moves with the action, and you can be two in it, and so you've each got your pair of goggles, and so you're shooting at different things around, like it's just a shooting gallery, right? We had accidentally pressed the stop motion button before we started it, so at first I was like, it's not that impressive. I'm just like, I guess I'm looking around and shooting at shit, but like I'm not really feeling immersed. Is this really what VR can do? And then I realized like, oh yeah, the button there. So I pressed it to start the motion again, and I was almost immediately motion sick. I was like, like immediately kind of plunges you into like it fools your body into thinking that like, oh no, we're gonna like we're gonna fall over, we're gonna plunge to our deaths or whatever, even though the motion is probably very minimal. And so in a way, like I was glad that the first half of the time that we were on that ride, we had the motion turned off, because even only like for half the time having the motion on, like we were not feeling quite right once we got off. So yeah, that was my arcade adventure. I don't think we're going to go again.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I get why a lot of arcades that still exist, which is not a lot to begin with, are all raw thrills machines and what have you. I mean, the reality of the situation is those are effectively just computers with a screen. Keeping them up and running is a relatively straightforward activity. Whereas, these older arcade machines, there's code on board. There's like specific pieces of hardware for that specific piece of equipment. Obviously, old stock for replacement parts is going to be going down. People who know how to fix that specific machine are going to be in more and more demand. And of course, they're also just older, so they're going to start smoking. Yeah. It's like, I get it.
But I wish like they had even just given me like one of those Pac-Man Galaga cabinets.
Oh, yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure that Namco's still making those.
Do they have
like that? That would have been nice.
This feels like the kind of place that would have the big giant Pac-Man 4-player Pac-Man screen. Like it's a 10 by 10 foot screen with 4-player Pac-Man.
Yeah, they did not have that. I forget what they did have. Like it was they had some version of Space Invaders, but I hadn't seen it before, but I can't remember what the gimmick was. I guess I'll need to go there and report back. It is near my office, my place of work, so next time I feel like going, I guess I can go check it out. But yeah, like I don't know. I did not try the VR Rabbids ride or anything. So
yeah, that sounds that sounds
two of my least favorite things. Well, I can't say that now.
I would say
I'm kind of a VR guy now.
From the owner of PSVR 2, who bought it after it was obvious where this was going.
Hey, it's good stuff. I'm not. What do you think I'm going to go and buy? I don't even know if there actually is a VR Rabbids game on PSVR 2, but that would be horrible. There's no way that exists.
No I thought to myself, I really hate horses, but God, I've got 3 of them, so it's just whatever. It's John, I appreciate your willingness to just go like.
I'm coming around to it. It's a process. What's this? I'm changing and growing as a person, James.
So you bought the VR machine that doesn't have any games?
It has some, and I've enjoyed them up to this point, right? I'm not playing them right now, but I enjoy them.
I've enjoyed them.
Well, I will again.
I'll enjoy them up to this point, up to a past point from when I last touched them.
That Horizon VR game is a heck of a climbing simulator. All right.
Wow.
Get my climb on.
Wow. Anyway, anything else, Guillaume?
No, that's it.
All right, break time. We're gonna take a break. When we come back, I don't know. Maybe a listener mail. Maybe we'll talk to John about VR, the VR expert, John Lindemann. You can stay tuned for whatever. Something's coming. There will be noises after the break, so stay tuned for those.
I prefer VR Evangelist, James.
Televangelist, great, awesome. Is that to pay off your PSVR 2? Is that what that's for?
Put your hand on your headset and join me.
God, you're gonna look like fucking Seth Rollins.
Feel the power of VR.
You're gonna look like Seth Rollins at on Raw on Monday with those fucking terrible glasses he was wearing.
That's what I'm just waiting for him to come out. I'm waiting for him to just come out, just wearing a full-fledged PSVR 2 headset. Fuck it.
And a mirror ball tracksuit.
Yep.
He might do that now. We might have just caused that, so that's fine.
Yeah.
All right, but if that happens, you heard it here first. But again, there'll be some more noises in your ear hole when we come back from a break, so stay tuned for that. Six times. I can't. What? I don't understand. All right. Anyway, we're back. Listener mail. I said we didn't know what we were going to do when we came back. We're definitely not going to be talking about Ubisoft fucking courts. John, you could be famous for years.
So dumb.
As the idiot who bought an NFT gun on the Ubisoft blockchain.
I mean, that might mean something to me if I actually played Ubisoft games. So
would it though? Like, I don't. Yeah.
Like, not that I care about any of that stuff, but
we don't need to relitigate NFTs. History has already litigated NFTs, and the verdict is shit. Emails, you send them. You send them to us. They come to us. We read them. We select them. We curate them. Which is my C button word of the week. It's a curation button where Nintendo serves you up a bespoke selection of games from the eShop based on our email from last week about trying to triple the number of games in the eShop. This bespoke model is not based on anything, so it's really just random, but they're not going to say that. Emails go to rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. That is a bespoke email address for which you can send us your well-crafted emails. And then we don't well-craft answers in response. So, these people did that. And I'll read the first one because I'm not going to say it's targeted, but it's a little bit targeted. Juan writes, I'm a little bit confused by his salutation, but we'll go with it. Honored King Charles, servants, and the other chap. I guess I'm the other chap? I don't know. I don't know what's going on here.
I suppose so, yeah.
Is Tactics Ogre Reborn worth buying and playing instead of Unicorn Overlord? If the artist formerly known as James, I'm not reading that Jones, is correct, Unicorn Overlord is closest to Ogre Battle. I ask because both are currently on sale he sent this email 7 days ago, so that might not be true anymore. currently on sale on the eShop, and both are similarly rated by critics and fans, with Unicorn Overlord being rated slightly better and also slightly more expensive. While I love Vanillaware games, it is my understanding that Matsuno reunited with his former team to write and design Tactics Ogre Let Us Cling Together, of which Tactics Ogre: Reborn is a remastered version, so sentimental reasons for the cheaper price make me favor Matsuno's work on the first instance. Speak to you soon. Does he mean that literally? Is he gonna like show up after I answer this email and say stuff? Yeah, so for those who are unfamiliar, Ogre Battle and Tactics Ogre are two branches of the same series. I don't know. Created by what's Matsuno's first name? I'm suddenly blanking on it. Yasumi Matsuno, who's worked on a bunch of stuff since then. He is quite well known, quite famous. You've almost certainly played something he made: Final Fantasy Tactics, Vagrant Story, Final Fantasy 12, then the Ogre Battle and Tactics Ogre. So the Quest Corporation, which is now the property of, I want to say Enix bought them before the merger with Square Enix. Something like that. They produced under him a game called Ogre Battle, and then they produced another game called Tactics Ogre. So they are kind of interesting in and of themselves. I mean, they are, like, I love Ogre Battle. I prefer Ogre Battle 64 immensely. Its sequel. There are 3 games in that line. There's Ogre Battle, there's Ogre Battle Gaiden, which is a Neo Geo Pocket Color game that only came out in Japan, and Ogre Battle 64. And then there's Tactics Ogre, of which there is 1. Now, what's happened is, at some point, Matsuno ends up working at Square, and he produces Final Fantasy Tactics. And Final Fantasy Tactics is an evolution of the Tactics Ogre gameplay. Basically, they brought him in and said, make Final Fantasy one of these. It might have been after the acquisition. I can't remember who bought Quest, if it was Enix or Square. Given the fact everybody ends up at Square, I'm going to guess it was probably Square. Square bought them in 2002. Okay. At which point, Matsuno's team goes and makes that. They make Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. I don't think he worked on A2 because he was working on Final Fantasy 12 at the time. But that becomes its own path. These are, and there's a lot of games that have since kind of followed that template. This is your tactics game where characters operate independently on the battlefield. Everything's on a grid. There's probably like environmental stuff, different classes of characters. Some have their own strengths and weaknesses, and there might be some positional stuff like trying to get behind somebody to hit them. There's going to be skills, stuff like that. Ogre Battle is a different beast altogether. Ogre Battle is about assembling units for combat. So rather than characters operating independently on a grid, you bundle them into units, and the formation of the units dictates how they perform in battle. So what characters are in the unit, what they're equipped with, how they're positioned relative to one another, and a bunch of stats will determine what happens. The Ogre Battle model is essentially just math. You can take 2 units and check off a bunch of variables, and there's no randomness to it. You know exactly what's going to happen. You could say, this unit will receive X amount of damage, this unit will receive Y amount of damage, this unit will win the encounter. These characters in the unit will be KO'd. Like, you can figure it all out. It's all right there in front of you. But after Ogre Battle 64, Square, Quest, Enix, whatever, none of the rights holders make any more of those games. Like, they just stop making them. There are a handful of titles that take ideas from those games and iterate over them, but even those are few and far between. The one I can never remember its name, it ends in The World Eaters, made by Nipponichi Software, which is actually on Switch now. Takes a lot of ideas from it, but it very much wraps the Disgaea-ness around it, so you get all the Disgaea bullshit, which is not very player friendly. It's about, do you like to grind? Unicorn Overlord is this. It's Ogre Battle. Like, it is Ogre Battle ass Ogre Battle. There's some art on the title screen of Unicorn Overlord of characters of multiple classes in different color uniforms, basically squaring off around the logo. This piece of art is almost a dead copy of some art in Ogre Battle 64 that is exactly the same. There are some songs, and I found this when I was trying to figure out songs to recommend for Greg for end music, that are almost note for note copies of Ogre Battle music. They were not fucking around. So it has the novelty of being, if you've never played an Ogre Battle game, like something you've never played before. Whereas you could, in theory, have played a game like Tactics Ogre. I have an affinity for the Ogre Battle model, so I speaking knowingly that, like, I'm going to prefer that one to the other. I have heard mostly good things about the remake of Tactics Ogre. There are some feedback that it is not as well liked as some previous versions of that. This is the remake of the PSP release. Or not remake, a sort of a remix of the PSP release where they tried to deal with some of the imbalances in the game, but apparently introduced some things that people don't like. There are some buffs that are randomly generated on the map that may give bosses more advantage. There's a level cap system that I've just read some feedback that some people don't like. So there's some downsides here with that one. I just played Unicorn Overlord for the second time in 10 months. I've put 110 hours into that game. I played it two very different ways. What I will say is, I don't feel like the game gives you as much flexibility in laying out your units as its Ogre Battle inspiration. Because so much of the party is named characters, and you can only evolve the named characters in a linear direction. You can't, like, pick a different route for them to take. Whereas in Ogre Battle, you have some flexibility in that space. But also, you can just start units from zero in Ogre Battle. There's a whole recruitment mechanism. Whereas in this game, you can buy ready-made units, but they're already of a certain class, and you don't tend to do it because you've got more units than you can put on the field anyway. So I feel like it's a less of a... There's an advantage to that, in that it means you can't just find a formation and just build it over and over again, which is my sort of default way of playing Ogre Battle. I find the formation that works. I used to call it the machine, and I just turned the machine loose and just said, like, go do your thing, man. I don't even need to worry about this shit. How those games work is you build the units, you put them on the map, and you tell them where to go. And if they run into enemies, they'll clash. And the clashes aren't resolved unless they just happen to win. A lot of times everybody will get their turns in, and then the two units will separate, and the one that took more damage will effectively be declared the loser and get bounced backwards. And the other one can just keep going. There are some other mechanics around, like, unit exhaustion and stuff that don't exist in the Tactics Ogre space. So the question is, what do you want to deal with? If you've played Final Fantasy Tactics and you really like those, then Tactics Ogre is the go-to. Because it's the inspiration for Final Fantasy Tactics. Like, it's the things they learned making that are the reason Final Fantasy Tactics exists the way it does. This has obviously been iterated over a couple times. Like I said, this is a remake of a remake at this point. So the team doing it is working with more information than they had in the past. Unicorn Overlord is none of that. It is a fresh game from a different team. So there are lessons that I would have much liked they know, that there are rough spots. There are high spots in this game, like, that weren't sanded down correctly because the team has never made one of these. The Vanillaware team has never even made a tactics game before. You could argue that maybe a little bit of 13 Sentinels is a little bit tacticsy, but it's so lightweight. Like, that game's strategy mode is so fucking easy. This is a whole different ballgame. The encounters are interesting in that game. They have some good ones. They have some bad ones. They have some that just feel like filler material. So, like, at its highest, there are encounters that feel super good and really well designed, and I think they're actually really smart. But I would say about a third of them they just exist. They just are. There's no bad encounters. Like, Ogre Battle has bad encounters. It has missions that are just like, this mission sucks. I hate this mission. I hate doing it. When I get to them, I could even name them right now. Dardanelles and Crossroads 2. It just sucks. And like, I see it's on the map and I go, fuck, I have to do this one now. And it's just because it's a bad encounter. It's just laid out poorly. I would say if you like Final Fantasy Tactics, go with Tactics Ogre. Because it's good to see the inspiration. If you don't, like if you played it and you're like, it's fine, definitely go with Unicorn Overlord. If you're coming at it from zero, I would say Unicorn Overlord is the more modern game. It does more to help you out. I think it took more risks. It's a more interesting product. I haven't played the remake of Tactics. I've played the original Tactics Ogre, Let Us Cling Together. I have not played the remakes because it was a PSP game. But I feel like you're probably in good stand with either of these. I'm really just voting with my personal preference, which is I like the Ogre Battle combat, even though I think Unicorn Overlord, some ways sanded things down too much, and in some cases didn't do it enough, and sort of took a little bit of the tactics and discovery out of it. But that game is still so fucking good. There is so much hidden content in that game. There's so many surprises. There's so many little details they jammed in there. There's so many characters that are interesting. The game is technically beatable as soon as you complete the tutorial chapter. You won't. I've seen someone do it. You won't. Like you can pull a straight to Ganon. But I played the game completely out of order last time. Did it cost me 10 hours? Yeah. Yeah, I did. It was really stupid and pointless. But I just wanted to know what happened if you did. And the answer is the game handles it. And that's pretty neat. Yeah, I really enjoy my time with it. I think both choices are solid. I guess I lean to that one, because of personal preference, and two, because I want to see Vanillaware do well. This is the biggest game they've ever made, and it's not even close, and somehow they scammed Sega into financing it. I want to see it get a good return so they can scam Sega into making something else cool. Because they've made a lot of cool stuff. 13 Sentinels, also very cool. You should play that. But yeah, they scammed the shit out of Sega with Unicorn Overlord. I want to say in the interviews they did ahead of time, they just straight up admitted to lying to Sega about how much this game was going to cost. And they're just like, yeah, no, we've got it under control. Don't worry about it. I want their return on investment to work out because it's cool and there's just not that many of these. And like, if something might kick Square Enix in the ass to make a remake one of their Ogre Battle games, that'd be cool as hell. Now, I could say something about Tactics Ogre. It's amazing that Square Enix financed a remake to Tactics Ogre and then a remake to the remake. Because historically, they haven't given one fucking shit about the stuff they got out of Quest. So, like, maybe that's gonna get them to put some more coals in the fire. Irons, the coals catch fire. Put more irons in the fire. Like, I don't know. Maybe nothing will. Maybe they're beyond hope. But I have to think, it seems like Unicorn Overlord did well. And I have to imagine people at Square Enix who worked on the original games that it's based on saw that and went, that could have been us. Damn it. So maybe that's my hope. That would be excellent. But like I said, I don't think you can go wrong with these. I think there's some particulars. If you like Final Fantasy Tactics, go with Tactics Ogre. If you even know what Ogre Battle is and you by some freak chance played it and like it, you can go to Unicorn Overlord. If you're coming at it from zero, I think Unicorn Overlord is the more interesting game. But I think if you're also coming at it from zero, they're both worth seeing because you'll be exposed to what is essentially like an evolution of a fairly fundamental piece of the console strategy game landscape and an evolution of the sort of genesis point for that style of grid-based tactics game. So it's a win-win for you, but That's my choice. And again, I'm basing it almost entirely on personal preference. And then a bunch of justification I'm coming up with after the fact. I'll admit it. I don't give a shit. I'll retroactively create justification all day. It's fine. Did anybody else have any thoughts on this one?
I really don't.
Okay. That's
Nothing.
Before I forget, I want to keep the C button thing going.
Yeah.
This is not the... Well, I guess... Yeah, sure.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I saw a particular picture of the Switch 2.
Yes.
And, with the... One of the controllers kind of halfway taken out of it, just like part of it still, like the bottom part is still kind of attached to the bridge between the right and left Joy-Con.
Yeah,
and
the grip.
So it reminded me of the way that they photograph grilled cheese sandwiches.
Oh, the cheese
and
pull?
So obvious. Yeah. You take a wedge and like you just separate the wedges sideways so that the cheese remains. I don't know. Yeah, like anyway.
Yeah,
so it reminded me of
that broad cheese pull.
Right. And so, yeah, obviously the C button is the cheese button.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Does it give you cheese?
It makes separating the Joy-Con from the Switch 2 more satisfying.
Oh, so it's like /R oddly satisfying, but in game form?
Yes.
Sweet. I love this. I love the idea of a cheese button. I love the idea of a cheese button that in no way provides you cheese.
Well, I don't know how it could, unless, the Switch 2 is organic and produces its own cheese. But then I don't know if I want anything to do with it.
John, was it EverQuest that lets you order pizza directly from EverQuest through a console command?
Yeah, I think it was, yep.
What if the cheese button just does that? It just orders a pizza. You just have a default pizza order.
That would be pretty good. It'd be pretty 90s.
What if you but also you'd accidentally hit it and then 40 minutes later a pizza shows up and you're like, God damn it, I didn't order this.
Yeah.
But then you've got a pizza and you're not mad anymore because now you're holding a pizza and you're like, well, I didn't order this. I didn't want to pay for this.
But I better eat it before it gets cold.
But I've got a fucking pizza now, so I guess I'm going to eat it. And then you're eating a pizza and you're like, you know what? This was worth it.
I mean, really, I just think in general, in any context, if a pizza just shows up at your door, you're probably going to eat it.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
I think that EverQuest was being cowards by not having you select the toppings, pay for the pizza, and then wait 20 minutes, and then a pizza shows up in game.
There you
not
go.
at your door, but
I would say I would say my C word would be cowards for obviously nobody else putting this functionality in.
I like that John just has a button that just declares other people cowards.
I think it'd probably be, these days, especially on the internet, pretty useful.
Yeah, it's probably the most useful use we've found so far.
Splatoon 4, when someone isn't doing their duty, going out to die to stop somebody from reaching the checkpoint with the Rainmaker or whatever, just, it plays the Simpsons cowards, the sort of sound drop.
I wanna play it in Mario Kart, whatever fucked up bullshit number they're gonna use for this one. Instead of the horn, it's just Louis. It's just a character in voice yelling cowards, or Donkey Kong making noises at you that strongly imply it. I think there's a lot of use for that button. I think there's a lot of use for the cheese button. What if it's not just pizza? What if it's delivery fondue, which sounds terrible. Sounds like an awful product. Now I'm going to go to DoorDash and see if I can just straight up order fondue. So awful. Update. I have no idea how I sent that so many times. Awesome. Okay. I'm glad it wasn't deliberate. All right. Other email. Guillaume, would you read it?
Sure. Meowth for Super Players writes, "Hello, our effin' party boys. This year is the 40th anniversary of Super Mario Brothers. I don't have to double check. I don't have to double check. The North American release date dates a few months before my date of birth. Nintendo hasn't said anything, presumably. Everyone there is busy getting ready to excrete a nondescript, all-ages multiplayer tech demo to launch alongside the Switch successor, New Switch U, Switch 2. Have you got any distinct memories about any of the 3/4 versions, NES, All-Stars, Deluxe, 35, I guess? Maybe some kind words for the Lost Levels or the Japan-only Hudson sequel on the Sharp something or other.
No one has kind words for that for Super Mario Brothers Special. No.
Could be a candidate for a retroactive of the month. I don't know. I just did a lap today through a definitely legally sanctioned Famicom port of Super Mario Brothers Special today.
Oh!
I still think it's still kind of a bastard in the back half, but it's fascinating to see what the Japanese sequels were experimenting with in the parameters of 1's template before 3 came along, and effectively crystallized 2D Mario design as we would know it going forward. That's all I've got. Love to snow.
Super Mario Brothers Special. All right. So, for those of you who have avoided Jeff Gerstmann unleashing this on the world as a thing, as I feel like I can trace it becoming a more well-known thing back to him, playing it on Giant Bomb before his time with Giant Bomb concluded, and I will just word it that way. The Sharp X6800, 68,000, had a NEC-developed Super Mario Brothers game for that system, for that computer, which did not have the same processing capabilities as the NES or the Famicom.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the X68000 because that was more advanced. That was the one that had the really good, the Capcom arcade ports and the Akamaju Dracula game that came back as Castlevania Chronicles on PS1. So it'd be like this is probably why Meowth went with the PC. So it might be 88 or 98.
Oh,
or,
yeah.
It's something like that.
It was a Hudson developed NEC PC8801 and the Sharp X1. Okay, that was what got me. So Hudson Soft made it. And these systems didn't have smooth scrolling. In fact, smooth scrolling is kind of an amazing novelty when Super Mario Brothers comes out. And this one did not have it, and it did not do it. And so, you'd hit the edge of the screen, and then it would load the next screen. And there might be shit waiting to kill you when the screen loads over. Also, it just sucks. It just sucks so much. And it can't do as many colors, so it's garish and ugly. The hammer shows up. But it's also, weirdly useless. It's a weird game, and it's bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. But a lot of the bad is just a result of the systems it was on not being able to do the kind of smoothness and the kind of animation and the responsiveness that the NES could. And of course, the scrolling. But some of the badness is just bad ideas that would have been bad, unsafe at any speed, as the saying goes. So the idea of an NES port of that game makes me distressed. An unofficial NES port. I find that distressing. Because there's very little good to be said about Super Mario Brothers Special. Either version. And while much of it is the consequence of the hardware being, unfit for duty, broadly speaking, these things are terrible in and of themselves. So I do have memories of the first time we got to watch Gerstmann play that, because I think he was experimenting with his Mister. And he was just like, well, what is this thing? And he played it, and he was just like, oh my god, this is terrible. And then it was just this, death march to try to finish that fucking thing. And yeah, it's hard as shit. Memories of the original Mario, I guess this would include, what's the port for GBA called?
Well, no, GBA, just Game Boy Color. That would be Deluxe.
Game Boy Color is
Deluxe,
yeah.
Meowth mentions, yeah.
The naming conventions for these are so fucked. It's hard to know. Is there there's not a Color port of Super Mario Land, right?
No.
No. Okay, yeah. Okay. There's an unofficial Game Boy Color port of Mario Land 2.
Yeah, the fan one, but not. Yeah, they didn't get around to. Game Boy Color ended up being pretty brief, sort of period. So I guess it maybe there were more potential colorized updates than just say for instance Link's Awakening. Yeah, where it did happen, but that just the kind of clock ran out on it a bit.
And then there's the port for the Super Mario All Stars version.
Oh yeah. Well, that's kind of the most notable of the version to a fair degree, isn't it? Because it's significantly different. I guess even the physics feel a little different and stuff.
They sure do.
Some of that was by accident. I guess some of it was probably on purpose, but yeah.
Yeah, I was not alive for this game. So, when it came out, so my memories of playing it the first time are very hazy. I was probably like 3 or 4. It might have been the first video game I played, to be entirely honest. It would have been up there, but I think my enduring memory of Super Mario Brothers is 6-year-old me, roughly, when I got my own NES. Getting frustrated with that game, and somebody bought me a Game Genie for some reason. I don't know why. And I went and looked up, because I certainly didn't know what it did. They just bought it, I guess, because of marketing. I don't know. And because they certainly weren't buying me good games. And I remember getting frustrated with it, so I put in a super jump, and the outcome was I pressed jump, and Mario just shot into the sky and never came back down. That's my enduring memory of playing that game as a child. I don't know. What about y'all? What's your enduring Super Mario Brothers, the original memory?
I just used to always play this. I think this is even before I actually owned an NES. A buddy of mine had owned an NES, and so I would always go over to his house to play this, and I was just, beat it eventually, but just,
with
it's
no
just
saves. Which is awesome.
Yeah. I just pretty much just remember banging my head against that game until, it was over weeks and weeks where, we would master, maybe the first or second levels. And then you would get a little bit farther and a little bit farther and a little bit farther. And then eventually you'd be able to go all the way to, the 7th world with no problem whatsoever. And then finally you kind of took it out. And really, I remember, too, kind of the context. I remember the games that I was playing alongside it were like stuff like Karnov. Just games that are just so hard as hell.
Oh, yeah.
So it actually, Super Mario Brothers became one of the easier games among the games that were out at that time, because there was games that were just absolutely hard as nails. So
right. And Karnov is janky in a way that Super Mario Brothers is not.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Super Mario Brothers Special is, so,
Yeah.
If you need that jank in your life.
Yep. And I mean, it's other incarnations. I do remember playing it as part of Super Mario All-Stars, but I don't really have any particularly fond memories of that version of it. Really, It's just that, the original NES and Super Mario Brothers, those things, they're just iconic to me. I mean, I still play Super Mario Brothers to this day. Really one of my all-time favorite games, like kind of a comfort game for me. Was playing through it on Steam Deck a little while back. All fully legal copies, of course. Just excellent. It's very much the thing is it's that it straddles that line between being an arcade game and a console game. It's where you can tell it's from an era where Nintendo was kind of trying to define really what a console game actually was. Like that very, very early time when they were sort of pulling stuff right out of the arcades, and they were trying to figure out, how do we make these game concepts work without the need to throw a quarter into it?
I mean, like Mario Brothers comes out on NES. Donkey Kong comes out on NES.
Well, and again, it's clearer when you think about it in terms of the Famicom timeline. The Famicom comes out in 83. Super Mario Brothers doesn't come out in Japan until 85. That's 2 years worth of porting stuff that they'd done in the arcades, like Donkey Kong, DK Jr., having original games that were very arcade in nature, like Devil World and, kind of all this sort of stuff. And then Super Mario Brothers is where you kind of reaching that point where it's like, okay, well, let's think about, it's still rooted in the arcade, and it's very literally in terms of a character that's been in Donkey Kong and Mario Brothers. But you are thinking, what can we really do at home that you can't do in the arcade? How can we leverage that into something more? And also, taking advantage of the fact that the Famicom could do hardware scrolling, like that, that's something, it was a kind of area of comparative advantage, that it had over other kind of home consoles of the day. A console that was leveraging, a game that was leveraging what the console was good at, in terms of the specific hardware, but also just in terms of what you can play at home, that longer form kind of idea and, the secrets and so for me, we were relatively early adopters for this country because the NES doesn't come out in Europe until 87, but we had one, I think, pretty, soon after it came out here. But we didn't have Super Mario Brothers, just kind of happenstance, really. I think it was just like, parents just got the kind of, the set with the zapper. And because that was, that's like the more deluxe set. Probably they thought they was probably just getting like the fancier one. But you didn't have Mario in with that. And then of course we could have had it afterwards, but it wasn't long until you started hearing about, it's Mario 2, and then like when you start reading magazines, it was like, in Japan they're on Mario 3 and then Mario 4 is going to be out. So it just kind of ended up getting passed over in that sense. But I do remember being a very small child, the first time I could ever remember playing Super Mario Brothers, there was a kind of bulk buying stuff, like kind of like Costco kind of thing. In those days anyway, like you had to have a membership to go there and buy stuff. And, my dad did with his job, and they had like an NES sort of station set up. And you could kind of mess around with Super Mario Brothers there. So I can remember playing, it must have been probably, about 4 or something, really small, and playing it a bit on there. But yeah, and then a friend of mine loaned me a PAL copy, their PAL copy, but I had an adapter at this point to use it, of Super Mario All-Stars. So I played some there, although I was much more interested in Super Mario Bros. 3, having, again, like with the NES didn't last that long, we kind of skipped ahead to Super Famicom and then played Super Mario World. But, obviously everyone raved about how great Super Mario Bros. 3 was, so I wanted to play that. So I did like play some of the original Super Mario Brothers on that, but not that much. So really, it was the Wii Virtual Console where I actually like played it, properly, and a bit like actually, fully beat it, you get the sort of second loop with the extra enemies and all that, do that as well. Like it really did take until then, until it was like, okay, I've kind of seen all of the game and really got to know it, and you could kind of see how the various other games, all the ways in which they kind of built off it and referenced it and stuff. And then also through Virtual Console, mostly I first played the Lost Levels, which is obviously it's very much just like, okay, what can we do with this template? And how can we push it places it hasn't gone yet? And, some of those places are kind of amusing and then some of them aren't. But, I will say I probably got the most out of that playing All-Stars later, like when I came back to, I had All-Stars, my own copy of All-Stars, where, I feel like just the ability, because it gives you the option in that case to save after each individual level.
Yes.
Rather than after a world. And certainly when you get into the latter stages of Lost Levels, like you really, really appreciate that. So yeah, that at that point I did actually see, I don't know whether literally everything of the Lost Levels, but certainly most of it at that point, and, kind of appreciate, what it was doing there. It kind of introduced Luigi having different like jumping physics and be more slippery and stuff. And then lastly, the deluxe version for GBC, that was a speed of Nintendo giving stuff away. There was a giveaway for that on Virtual Console at some point on 3DS. And that's when I played that. And yeah, my abiding memory of that, certainly with respect to the lost levels, is like, wow, having a diminished view of the screen is a big problem with these particular, when it's like, I'm gonna hit a spring and like go miles in the air and trust the wind to carry me, and then I'm gonna land on this quite small section of ground. You want the best possible for you for stuff like that, but it had I think at least playing the more like the levels from the original Mario Brothers the original Super Mario Brothers, I should say, was still like workable. It's compromised, but it has some. You could still kind of enjoy it, but obviously it's a bit beside the point. It was a curiosity at that point because you could play. The Virtual Console release of the actual Super Mario Brothers on your 3DS. There was no real, there was like the multiplayer mode, I guess, but I mean, I never used that. You could, I'm not sure you could you, with the link cable stuff, unless it was Pokemon. They didn't really add that for 3DS games, did they?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah. So, yeah, just, interesting, but not the way to play the game.
Yeah.
I had, I had mostly the same experience as John, where I didn't own the game, but I would go to friends and play it there. And, it was, again, like mostly my impression is mostly a feeling, like, oh wow, like this game is so full of so many secrets. You can jump in some place and there was an invisible block and there's like a one up in there, or there's a vine, and then like, whoa, you go into the clouds and you collect lots of coins. Like the games, other games that I played at the time were not like that. You play Contra or Ninja Gaiden, or like they're not like just these secrets. Like,
right, they're scrolling action games.
Yeah,
they're to Greg's point, they're more arcade like.
Yeah, but yeah, but this one, yeah, like Super Mario Brothers, like it was always cool to find out some new thing about it, and it's kind of quaint, I guess, to think of it like this, but back in the day, like it was also kind of spectacular, just like the variety, like just discovering this game as you manage to play through it further and further into it, like, oh wow, okay, an entire world that's just water, and like, okay, like I'm in these giant mushrooms, sure, and okay, this is the night level, this is like what's going on here, and like slippery level, what the fuck. It was so it was kind of, I don't know, I think I played it in an age where all of that stuff was kind of slightly mind-blowing, it didn't take much, I guess. And then Mario 2 and Mario 3 would go on to blow my mind even more. But like it was a constantly surprising game the first time that you were playing through it. So that's my main memory of it.
I would. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I would say on the topic of lost levels, I fucking hate lost levels. Like, I hate everything about lost levels. Like, I hate that.
It's not that fun.
I first encountered it. I did have a friend who had like the Famicom cart with an adapter.
Oh.
And yeah, the most interesting thing about it was the fact that it was a Famicom cart and an adapter.
Yeah.
I did not understand what I was seeing. Like, why is this cart so small and plugged into the second half of the
I
cart?
thought that was a disc system game.
Should have been. Yeah.
Well, he had like a tiny card. I don't know. Like,
I'm just trying to think, because certain later Famicom games, disc system games, I should say, were put on cartridges later, such as Super Mario Bros., as it was called, Super Mario Bros. USA was put on a cartridge.
Yeah.
I think
there was a cartridge release of it. Okay.
Right, okay.
And it was not early. Like, definitely part of the reason why I was not that interested in it is that, like, when he told me, like, oh, this is like Super Mario Brothers 2 in Japan, I did not really understand because, like, we already had Super Mario Brothers 2 and 3, I think, you know, so, yeah, it might have been, like, a late cart release or whatever.
Yeah,
but,
and there was no way at that time to look up something and clarify that, right?
Right,
Not
yeah.
really,
So
yeah.
I had no context. I did not know that the second part of it was an adapter. Like, it had, like, a ribbon on it. I was like, this is so weird. So, you know, so you didn't get stuck in the NES when you pulled the cart. Yeah, it was just weird. And, yeah, like, ultimately, I think we played it a little bit and did not really enjoy the poisonous mushrooms and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, this is kind of bullshit and not fun. And why aren't we playing Mario 3 instead?
Right. Super Mario Brothers 2 for super players, as they called it. Like, it just felt, I get it because where that game was at that moment in time, you know, there were stories in the Japanese press about, like, parents bought it for their kids, and then when their kids went to sleep, they went and played Super Mario Brothers all night. And so, like, I get that there was probably a population of players that had gotten really good, and there was at least some chatter. I don't know what the mechanism for communicating it was in 1986, but I know it existed. Talking about how to use, like, how to do some of the bugs and stuff that we talk about now with Super Mario Brothers, how to use them to clear stages more quickly or more easily or to bypass shit. And so there's stuff in Mario Brothers 2, aka Lost Levels, that requires you know how to do some of the weird shit that you can do in Super Mario Brothers that wasn't intentional.
Also, that punishes you for doing things that you perhaps might expect will help you, isn't it?
Right.
Like there's backwards warp zones.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you covered the warp zone. That's not. Yeah, this one goes backwards, shithead.
Yeah, welcome back. You thought you cleared the stage, but we're back now. Yeah, it's weirdly punishing, and like that. I guess that was their marketing scheme of like, okay, you've played Mario Brothers to the end, or Super Mario Brothers to the end 2 or 3 times. You want something with a little more edge. I just feel like it would have been better if they just made new levels, like actual new levels, not like fucked up versions of levels. Like this is.
I assume, you know. I mean, obviously, all the game development and all it was a quicker turnaround back there. But I mean, you know, like I said, 86, it was a quick turnaround. Yeah, and Nintendo
June
were busy.
86.
Nintendo were very busy in that period trying to create games again, going further still with this notion of like, we want to do things that are more kind of specific to the home experience with the disc system and stuff like Zelda, where it's like, okay, this is going to save and this is going to be a much more expansive kind of game and all that. So it just, yeah, I can't imagine this was that much of a like priority in terms of development. It was like, look, this game is very popular here and we want to capitalize on that without, you know, sort of compromising. Because it was very much like that was the culmination. Super Mario Brothers was the culmination of those first few years of the Famicom. Right. But, you know, yeah, as I've said plenty of times, well established, Yamauchi had this whole theory of the 3-year fad sort of cycle. And they I think before Super Mario Brothers blew up, they had already decided like they were going to do the disc system as a sort of refresh for the Famicom in Japan, so they wouldn't run out of steam, and that they were going to do different kinds of games. And so, you know, like just kind of putting out more Super Mario was not really like what they were concentrating on. They even though it was very successful, like they had bigger, they felt like they had bigger fish to fry, and they weren't wrong either, you know, so but it kind of worked out.
But they also needed a Mario game to sell the disc system, which is probably a big part of it. But like,
it's another thing. Yeah, well, that's the thing. It was another reason why you do it, right? It's just like we could do something and say, hey, you know, you could get even more challenging levels on the disc system. Like that was another selling point. But I guess it wasn't like where their main focus was going to be. That would take a while, you know. It would be until in many ways, like Super Mario Brothers 3, as Meowth kind of suggests, it kind of is like the real 2, you know, when they kind of actually came back around to it and said, you know, let's really think about what we can do with this series, as a series, how we could develop it and then it did set a lot of the sort of standards and benchmarks for the series going forward after that.
So Super Mario Brothers comes out in 85 September in Japan, and 2/Lost Levels comes out June 86 in Japan. So we're literally talking 9 months, like the time it takes to gestate a child. That went from the release of this game to, for super players, being a thing on the market. Now, this system probably made that a little bit easier because it'd be easier to produce than the cartridges, but still, that's a crazy tight window to put out that game. So I get
but
it.
Again, they probably were very, with this whole notion about fads and all that. I mean, they were probably pretty sensitive of like, hey, this is hot right now. We want to get something out quick. And again, that doesn't necessarily speak to like taking the most time and repurposing the most top tier development resources to say, let's do something really thoughtful and that actually furthers the design like they would eventually with Super Mario Bros. 3. It's just, let's do more of it. And that's more challenging for the people that have done, played it to death and done everything you can possibly do.
Well, and it's not like the company was working on Legend of Zelda. The people who made Mario were working on Legend of Zelda.
Specifically those people. And again, they were, you couldn't really argue with their sort of logic in that way. And again, it was helping to give people a reason to buy the disc system because it's like, well, this is actually like a really different kind of experience than what you're getting with just the base Famicom at that point. And that was a lot of the games that came out on the disc system were of that kind, that where save in progress is a big deal. It might be the kind of game that otherwise would have been associated with personal computers at the time, like Famicom Detective Club or whatever, so they were trying to get different experiences at that point.
Yeah. Anything on 35?
I enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, I played a lot of it. I very narrowly missed out on beating 8-4, like right as it was shutting down. And then I would have been not able to play as Luigi because it would have been shut down. But theoretically, I would have achieved the the greatness of beating every level at some point in a 35 run and therefore being able to play as Luigi. So no, I mean, it was fun. I guess that's the thing, is that whole, whether what they'll do for the 40th anniversary, I'm sure they'll do something, but obviously it's just such a different situation. Like the 2020 was just very well suited for them to try and make a thing out of it, because it was like a lot of it was, first of all, it was just the year of Animal Crossing, obviously, but other than that, it's like, hey, we could really use with, kind of, concentrating on stuff like this, because everything else got thrown into turmoil and uncertainty. Whereas, on this occasion, 40th anniversary might seem like a more natural a point to like do some big celebration, but they've got bigger fish to fry with the launch of a successor console. That's a pretty big deal. And so I'm sure you'll be able to put, some of these things that they're going to do under a vague sort of tent of, celebrating Super Mario Brothers 40th
style bullshit.
We've, to some extent, if you want to talk about the next Mario Kart, whatever it's going to be called, we assume there'll be a mainline Mario platformer of some description within the first so many months of the Switch 2 coming out. Seems like a very likely. So they may well, put that under that kind of banner, but that's going to be the focus, isn't it? Whether you could bring back Super Mario 35 for a limited time or something, just to like roll back the 5 years or so. And it's been a cracking 5 years, I think we can all agree. Let's enjoy that again. I mean, it was like, it's not my favourite. That would be F-Zero 99 for sure, right, of the Switch Online stuff. But, some of that's because like that's the only bit of F-Zero we've got for many, many years. Whereas, Super Mario stuff is much more common, but it was fun. It gave you a different kind of, spin a different way to to enjoy those levels and that classic game, which at that point, like I said, I had played it enough on Virtual Console and stuff to actually have a working knowledge of the levels and not have it be a problem. The biggest thing was just you ended up playing 1-1 and 1-2 too many damn times. That they needed to like do something to stop that from happening as much as it did.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, maybe they bring back Super Mario 3D, what was it, All-Stars?
Yeah, that was obviously a 35th anniversary thing that had Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Galaxy 1 and only 1. Do you bring that back? Do we have something else that brings back, maybe Galaxy 2 this time? I mean, the other thing that's more, I would say it's more pertinent to, the 40th anniversary of it being Super Mario Brothers, because of course, I was just talking about, playing DKC Returns, but, some of those new Super Mario Brothers games, have not been released in a while, have they? New Super Mario Brothers for DS is going back to 06, and New Super Mario Bros. Wii from 09. Like, they haven't really, done like a collection or some sort of updated I mean, you had the Virtual Console Wii U release of the DS game, I guess.
Yeah.
But it was we're talking Wii U Virtual Console. How many people actually bought that?
Even 2 has been a while at this point.
Yeah. No, exactly. So Deluxe came back and it sold very nicely on Switch, and Super Mario Brothers Wonder came out and that sold well. So it's not like you haven't had, but maybe a new Super Mario Brothers collection, or maybe something that just focuses on those games that have been the longest without coming back could be an option.
Maybe remake the stages in the engine of Deluxe and call it a day. Just be like, done.
Yeah, it's an all-stars type of game where you kind of unify the aesthetic and the physics or whatever, but like have all the levels present. You would think there's options there of some description.
Yeah, I mean, I would really like it if on the Switch 2, if they have themes like they have on 3DS. I really like those. And to me, it's really a very easy way for Nintendo to take my money. And I just hope that they would have that functionality on Switch 2, and that they'd have a whole bunch of Super Mario Brothers themes, because I would probably get all of them. I love that kind of stuff.
My Japanese 3DS, I ended up getting a lot of they had like some cool Sega themes of all things.
Mm-hmm. Were they only in Japan?
I don't know if how many of them were absolutely exclusive or not, but it just seemed apt, because a lot of what I had on my Japanese 3DS was like all the Sega 3D classics.
Right.
So it ended up with like a Space Harrier theme, and there's like the Saturn like startup screen theme and a Dreamcast startup
really cool
screen theme. And it's just funny to think like I could get that on the 3DS, and on Switch you get a black or white screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could go from like themes based around consoles from other people, from other manufacturers, let alone, like you said, like Mario, it's something like mainline. It went that far afield, but then you get nothing.
Yeah, I don't think I would have, if those would have been available on the North American shop, I would have bought those for sure. So I don't think they were, because I remember going through every single theme, because I bought the Metroid, because they have the Metro, the Samus Returns theme. Like, that's what's on my 3DS right now. I just took a look at it, and I 100% would have, like a Space Harrier theme. I would have bought the hell out of that.
We didn't get any DLC for Wonder, but I could see them be dropping like one, but like they did with was it Captain Toad, where they just dropped like a handful of stages much later. Like, here's a stage where the Wonder effect turns it into Super Mario Brothers for the anniversary.
Maybe you could get the poison mushroom equivalent for the Wonder Flower. So we get like Super Mario Brothers Wonder for super players, and when you get, it's the same until you get the poison Wonder Flower, and then it turns it into a nightmare. That could be some sort of weird comedy DLC of some description.
Just one stage, no charge for it, just something to get people talking about the game again, because of course you'll be able to buy it on Switch too if you don't already have it. Just like playing the long game with that one to boost its sales. because there's definitely not going to release a 3D and 2D Mario game very close to one another. It's just
you would have thought that whatever the main sort of Mario game, if we're assuming they're going to try and follow a similar playbook that they did with the original Switch, and it's like, we get Mario Kart really early, maybe at launch or like the next month. And then for the end of the year, you get the Mario platformer. Is that if it's a 3D one, you would think, then you have 2D. If you're going to have a 2D platform game somewhere, it would have to be one of the other. It would have to be like Kirby or maybe a new DK one, having just done the old ones. But yeah, or on the other hand, if it was side scrolling, the 3D one would have to wait. Given that Super Mario Bros. Wonder exists, it came out and not that long ago, you would think the more natural it would be the 3D game. But even that leaves a lot of questions. Like, is it like Odyssey? Is it like 3D World? Is it like Bowser's Fury? Or is it its own sort of particular hybrid of some of those things? Like, yeah, there's a lot of questions to be answered there.
Yeah. All right. I think we're done with this email. Good?
Yep.
All right, then we're done with all email. In fact, we're done with the show. So emails, rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. That's rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. It is time to use some music that oftentimes you select, although I don't know if we did this week, to end the show. Greg, what music is going to conclude this episode?
Well, I selected something this week. This is a game that has not been re-released from its original form. It's also a game I've not played. But it was a rare thing in this particular series. But a few days after this episode is published on the 15th of February, it will be the 20th anniversary of the release of Star Fox Assault.
Oh.
So yeah, it's a somewhat forgotten kind of game because it hasn't been re-released, and it was in 2005. Resident Evil 4, sort of notwithstanding, was mostly a bit forgettable for the GameCube. I think it was really, in Nintendo terms, it was all about the DS just powering to what would end up being at least until the Switch passes it, which I think it pretty much will. It's pretty much guaranteed at this point, but becoming the biggest platform in Nintendo history. Meanwhile, GameCube, like I said, had some games worth playing that year, like Resident Evil 4, and there was a Fire Emblem that year and stuff like that. But a lot of it was like, okay, yeah, you can kind of tell they're starting to move on to the next platform and indeed to the DS itself. But Star Fox Assault was itself quite belated. I was surprised looking back at this. Apparently it was first announced in 2002, which again, back then, that's a big lead time, isn't it? Considering it didn't take as long to develop games generally.
No.
In those days, there was a sort of Triforce initiative between, among Nintendo and Sega and Namco. And it was initially announced that, the Star Fox game was going to be, handled by Ace Combat talent within Namco. That ended up not being the case, apparently. No. By the time that they actually developed it, there was like people that worked on Klonoa or whatever. So, yes, it took, it seems like it was a bit of a troubled development. It took quite a few years to come out, and it didn't review that well when it arrived, so I didn't buy it. Again, if I'd been informed how few Star Fox games were going to be coming my way in the ensuing 20 years, I might have bought it anyway.
Right. And if I had known it would be so hard to play later, I probably would have bought it just to have it. But yeah, like the reviews came out were just like, why is Star Fox walking around on his 2 feet shooting at aircraft in the air? And I didn't have a satisfactory answer for that, so I said, no, thank you.
Yeah, it was just one of these things where you kind of felt like, oh, well, we'll wait and see what the next Star Fox brings. And of course, the next Star Fox was not that far away because Star Fox Command came out on DS, and I did get that eventually. And that was its own particular spin that was kind of, salvaging some things from the cancelled Star Fox 2 that at that point, had never been made available. Obviously, it has been since. But, this game, Star Fox Assault, is relatively rare among Star Fox games in that it's not like a version of the first game in some way. Like,
right.
Because a lot of them aren't they? Like Star Fox 64 is kind of a retelling of the first game. Then we have Star Fox 64, like, again, with like the 3D game on 3DS. And then we've got Star Fox Zero, which is kind of a retelling of Star Fox 64. So this one actually does like advance the plot beyond Star Fox Adventures. It actually incorporates that for some reason.
Great.
That I don't know because I haven't played either of those games. And then Star Fox Command kind of advanced it further, and then never any further after.
Time
But
stopped.
the funny thing about that, though, making that distinction, is that the music is actually very Star Fox 64. It's basically, there are exceptions. You've got like the multiplayer battle mode music and a few other pieces, but for the most part, it's basically Star Fox 64 songs performed by an orchestra. And, there's nothing wrong with that. Nope. At all, because Star Fox 64 music is cool, and also it really, really benefits from the superior instrumentation. There are definitely times when you play Star Fox 64 where it just, the tinny sort of nature, especially of like the brass, kind of synth, does not do it any favours, and it kind of loses some of its impact, as a result of that. But, here with this, we have orchestral versions, and for that reason, actually, quite a few of the tracks made their way into, I think, Brawl at first, Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and then later Smash games, because it's like, it's kind of like what we did for Nintendo songs in Melee, but they did it for us, for Star Fox Assault. The one I've chosen is the Star Wolf theme, because this really benefits from actual brass. This sounds great with the real instruments. And it's just a memorable and fun song brought fully to life. This you feel like this is what it's meant to sound like, and it's great.
Cool. All right. Well, on that, bye, everybody.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Sorry, I was muted. I was like, I said it. Anyway.
Awkward. All right.